Hi, everyone. Welcome to the live stream. Michael Tracy is in here right now. So, yeah, Tracy is going to join us in a few minutes. He's just finishing something and he'll be with us soon. So yeah, a lot that's exciting is going on in the world. The bombing of there was a big attack on Ukraine that killed something like I think a dozen civilians and got basically no headlines. Everyone is paying attention to Iran and Israel lobbing rockets at each other. It's it's the Iran thing is interesting. Um, the Iran thing, we've been hearing about warnings of Iran getting a nuclear weapon or having a nuclear program for the last, I mean, since the Bush administration, for the last 25 years. So I've always thought if, like, the goal of Iran was, as people like Ted Cruz will represent it, they'll say, well, Iran wants to get a nuke and then use it against Israel, and then Israel will be destroyed. And that's like the entire goal of the regime. Well, I mean, it's been decades now, and they've never developed a nuclear weapon. A reasonable kind of interpretation of their behavior is they might like it as a negotiating ploy, but their ultimate goal is not to destroy Israel. So, anyways, I'll bring Michael in here. Michael says he's ready. I'm sending the invite. And so we're in this place where it's hard to it's like hard to I think that diplomacy can actually work, but I think that Iran might have too many factions within it. I think there are too many spoilers for it to work. So it's kind of this tragic thing where it's like you could negotiate with Iran, but you sort of can't. Hey, Michael, how are you?
Hey, how's it going?
A lot of exciting things happening, huh?
Nah, not really.
What's the latest? Trump said something. He had a interview and he said something, right?
Um, he was speaking at the opening or the construction site for the new flagpoles that he's installing at the White House.
Oh, here. You know what? I have it at the New York Times. Let me pick it up.
And he was asked about whether he's going to join the strikes.
Okay.
Said, maybe I will, maybe I won't, which is
Y-
about respect because he loves
Yeah.
to maintain his element of surprise.
It's so stupid. I mean, he's sitting there with these guys in like these yellow, like, I don't know, what are these, construction or whatever, these working man hats and their outfits. And he's like, oh, you all voted for Trump. The Federal Reserve, they're stupid. I should appoint myself. It's like such grotesque, it's such a grotesque display
Did he appoint
of him just
the
trying to,
federal?
huh?
He said he should appoint himself as the chairman of the Federal Reserve.
Yeah. He's like, maybe I should just appoint myself. I think he said something like, we have a stupid person there.
Well, that's kind of funny.
It is kind of funny, but
I
it's
mean,
just
that
like,
the thing with Trump that I've never found it difficult to readily acknowledge is that he continues to be amusing from a pure entertainment standpoint.
Yeah, it sort of gets, I don't know, is it getting old? It gets a little
Sometimes
bit old.
it's old, but like I just chuckled at the idea that he would say that he would install himself as the chairman of the Federal Reserve.
The funny thing was what was the funny well, I mean, it's also, like, getting kinda dark because they're asking, like, did when Biden got cancer, I was surprised by his response. Did you see this?
Well, his initial response was very formulaic. Like the very first thing he said was, "We wish President Biden and his family the best of."
It was like a tweet, right? It was like a
Yeah,
truth. Yeah.
yeah. But then when he was asked to about it more extemporaneously, he basically said he doesn't care that Biden has cancer or something to that effect.
Yeah. Yeah, and he like bashes him about the Minnesota shooting. He says I'm not going to talk to Tim Walz. He starts insulting him. He says like he's a loser or like he's a sick guy or something like that. He wasn't always this kind of like mean spirited. I don't think that would have been Trump like 5 or 6 or 7 years ago.
Um. Well, during the first term, he constantly would bring up Hillary Clinton's emails and things. Just
Well, yeah, Yeah.
But so just as a foil, so he would be demonizing at every opportunity Hillary Clinton or Obama. Obviously, I think that's accelerated to some extent, or as you suggest, gotten a bit more vicious and personal just because he views Biden not only as like the political opponent that he can use as a scapegoat, which many politicians do to some degree, Trump a bit more theatrically, but he sees Biden as the leader of the regime that was trying to put him in prison.
Yeah. I guess that's right. Yeah, I guess that kind of added to the bitterness. Yeah, and
Which is
people
not entirely wrong, but maybe it's not exactly how Trump imagines it, but like there's a kernel of truth there.
I mean, there's not really a kernel of truth there because Biden
Well,
himself
did the Biden Department of Justice not?
well, the Biden Department of Justice, but Biden was not micromanaging. He appointed Merrick Garland, and there's no evidence he said, Merrick Garland, you have to prosecute Trump or anything like that.
Biden, I mean, there's a New York Times article from 2021 in which Biden essentially conveyed indirectly. Of course, he's not like Trump, where he's going to put out a tweet ordering his attorney general to do something, but signals were clearly sent, conveyances were clearly made that Biden favored
Well, maybe.
prosecuting Trump over January 6th.
Signals. Well, and then the other thing, it was one
And
step.
so did the entire like Democratic apparatus want Trump to be
Yeah.
prosecuted over January.
But it was one step removed on top of that. It wasn't even Garland. It was an independent counsel. So, like, you have these steps like Biden may be conveyed to Garland, which is not enforceable in any way. It doesn't guarantee anything. And then Garland appoints an independent prosecutor, and that's how you get the prosecution. So it's very kind of tenuously connected to Biden.
Nonetheless, it's true that the Biden DOJ, to the extent that we use that nomenclature, prosecuted Trump.
Yeah, that's true. Okay. Well, that's, I guess,
And
maybe that's
Garland
just
appointed as independent counsel Jack Smith, who was this semi-fanatical international law zealot, literally from The Hague at the International Criminal Court.
okay. What does that make him? Why does that
Well,
make him a
it
zealot?
shows that there was like an ideological valence to whom Garland appointed to oversee these Trump prosecutions that suggested it wasn't just going to be within the narrow confines of ordinary criminal
Yeah.
law.
Well, anyways, okay. Well, that's a side discussion. Anyways, well, this Iran thing. Where do you see? Yeah, so where do you see this going? Do you think does it look like Trump is gonna hit them?
Well, I mean, he's telegraphing it. Think what happened the first day that the operation was launched. He seemingly engaged in public disinformation. I know that term gets overused.
Yeah.
And it's used to collapse a whole array of stuff into one category, including sometimes political speech on somewhat spurious grounds. But for Trump to have put out a post 3 hours before the operation was launched, or even less, saying, I've directed my entire administration to focus on achieving a diplomatic resolution to the Iran situation, and we're committed to diplomacy, et cetera, at which point he must have known, if he had any foreknowledge at all, that the bombing campaign was about to be initiated.
Mm-hmm.
And that public disinformation in like a classical sense. And so everything that he's been saying, or that the administration has been saying ever since, needs to be seen through that prism. And there's a lot of evidence of an acceleration of U.S. military assets in the region, tanker, aircraft positioned, etc. And I think maybe the most dispositive factor is that Fox News seems very much in favor of joining the Israeli operation, and that's what Trump is principally influenced by. I don't usually watch the 5 p.m. chat show.
Yeah.
But I've been looking at it lately just to get a sense of what they're saying, because it's very likely that Trump would be watching it or similar shows. And they acknowledge, or at least they gesture at the fact that there is some debate within MAGA or the America First movement about whether bombing Iran is America First. But they invariably come up with a rationale for why it is in fact America first to bomb Iran and do regime
Yeah,
change. So they're trying to deny that this is a regime change operation, I guess.
yeah. It seems like what you're saying from Fox is that they want the U.S. involved, but like they want to worship Trump more than so they'll call Trump brilliant no matter what. They have a slight preference for war, but like the real preference is kissing up to Trump.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, what's seemingly going on is they're surmising that Trump is wanting to get involved.
Yeah.
And so they then have to reason backwards from that to explain
Well,
how
it's
it.
interesting. I mean, it's interesting which way it's going. Yeah, it's kind of going in both directions. It's like Trump kind of. Well, what was it like when Israel started striking, and then Trump was like a little bit like distant from it? Yeah, I wonder what that
Trump
1 or 2 days
was
was.
from it. It was just that bogus Rubio statement that people. I mean, the first statement from the administration after the campaign was launched was that kind of cursory written statement that was put
Yeah,
out.
no, but it's not just nothing. It's not cursory. It's not completely pro forma. It's like we had nothing to. It was basically we had nothing to do with it,
Well, it
which
was
is like
carefully worded. It didn't necessarily mean that there was no facilitation or coordination. In fact, it strongly implied that that was the case if you have any background knowledge of how U.S. Israeli relations function. It simply communicated that the U.S. maybe was not like directly kinetically involved in the initial phase of offensive operations. Didn't mean that there was no quote involvement. Of
hmm.
you don't think that the U.S. Israeli intelligence sharing apparatus was at all a factor?
Well, I mean, it was kind of like if that's the statement you would expect if I believe the reporting. It makes sense that Trump wants to basically was just watching and would love to take credit if it goes well. And that's basically it. I think Netanyahu is smart, and I think Netanyahu has kind of played him pretty well. Like Trump, to extent, wanted to be played. It's not like he's very, it's not like he's pro Iran or anything like that. Um, but it is like kind of I think the Israelis know that like just because of the nature of Trump's coalition, if Israel's actually ever gets really in trouble, if like somehow I don't know Iran is like surprised we have a nuke or they have enough things they make life in Israel very very hard, like they know in the end that the Trump administration is going to bail them out, right? I think Netanyahu can keep pushing. And he knows he can keep pushing. Trump might like it, he might not like it, but in the end, like he's going to come back and he's going to be on his side just because of Trump's instincts and because of the way the Republicans are.
I'm just not buying this narrative that Trump was in any way meaningfully quote unquote played by Netanyahu. Yes, Netanyahu is a savvy operator. When he first came to prime minister in the 1990s, actually, he was hailed, Netanyahu was, as the first American prime minister of Israel, kind of as a semi joke, but just referring to the fact that he spent his formative years in the United States. He went to high school in Pennsylvania, etc. He obviously has a very comprehensive understanding of the nuances and subtleties of American politics. And so, yes, he understands the nature of the Trump coalition and how to phrase things or frame things in public and probably also in private. However, the idea that Trump was just like unwillingly dragged into it just to me just doesn't pass the smell test. Trump said in an interview with Time magazine in April, he was asked about the prospect of bombing Iran with Israel. And he said, I'm not going to get dragged into it. And the reporter was like, oh, really? So you're not going to join Israel in bombing Iran? And he said, no, it's that I'm not going to get dragged into it. I'm going to go in voluntarily and enthusiastically, and I'm going to lead the pack. So
I'm sure he probably said, did he not say if they don't negotiate, if we don't come to an agreement? It's always like, you're fight. You seem to believe strongly in like Trump's consistency, much more than
no,
a lot of other people.
in his more it's more in his agency. And yeah, there was consistency in how these so-called negotiations were structured.
Yeah,
They
it was
were structured
weird.
in such a way that they were doomed to fail almost by design. I don't know if Trump had consciously in his head the explicit intention that he was going to structure the negotiations that he for some reason delegated singularly to his like catch-all envoy Witkoff. I don't know if Trump, like, if there was a flash of a thought inside his brain somewhere saying, "Oh, I want these to fail so we can then join
Yeah.
a Israeli operation." But they were structured in a way that made that inevitable because Iran was never going to be able to
Yeah.
accede to the fundamental U.S. demand to essentially inflict on itself a huge national humiliation and forfeiture of sovereignty. So, like, what are we supposed to infer
Yeah.
from?
So explain this because yeah, this is the interesting part because they had this JCPOA, which let Iran enrich some kind of uranium within Iran, right?
Yeah, the
And then the
JCPOA.
Trump administration wanted something. The initial demand was something more extreme than
Official demand.
JCPOA.
It's not as though they put out a formal policy paper spelling out what their official demands were. It's always hazy, just like it always is with Trump.
Mhm.
Especially if you're just going to outsource the negotiations seemingly to Steve Witkoff, who's a New York real estate guy
Mhm.
who happened to be on the golf
Yeah,
course
is
from.
but isn't Witkoff understood as a dove? This is kind of weird. Witkoff in the reporting is understood as like a more dovish guy.
And I don't buy that. I mean, I think that's part of the facade. Witkoff has been a huge pro-Israel guy. You know, he's
Yeah.
going around to these pro-Israel galas. Literally the night before the Israeli operation was launched, he was speaking at some fundraiser with Miriam Adelson
Oh, really?
at, for United Hatzalah, which is like this
Mm.
Orthodox, ultra Orthodox aid organization in Israel.
Mm.
And he was saying nuclear Iran is an existential threat. The United States and Israel must unite to combat this threat, whatever the cost, etc. So yeah, I mean, a lot of these hagiographical profiles of Witkoff that have been pumped out over the past few months depict him as a quote dove. And his diplomatic acumen has been praised. Oh, he's like the new Kissinger. He has all this unconventional thinking and he's a breath of fresh air. He's not from the establishment, so maybe he really knows what he's doing. He's going to shake things up. What has he accomplished? Every diplomatic portfolio that was delegated to him is
Mm.
dramatically worsened.
Yeah. Well, do you think he?
What's going on with Hamas in Gaza? What's going on with Iran? It's all getting worse. Iran catastrophically so.
Yeah. Do you think the so do you think there's an Israel Russia like what's your view of his role in the Russian negotiations? Because that's the place where I hear the context of he's a dove in these things. Is Russia and Israel different or is he the same across these areas?
Well, I mean, I think I would maybe caution against this oversimplified dove versus hawk framing. It is the case that Witkoff. Okay, so compared to the Biden administration, it is dovish to even engage in direct negotiations with Russia at all.
Mhm.
So we can stipulate that. And it is true that Witkoff, after he had his succession of meetings with Putin, would come back and say, you know, these four oblasts have a majority or a plurality or whatever it is of Russian ethnics.
Yeah.
Kind of gave some credence to potentially acquiescing to some of Putin's.
Yeah, and I remember Witkoff had these weird things, like where he would be like, "Oh, the one about Putin giving Trump like a portrait or something," and then like the way Witkoff talks. I don't know if this is reflected in the negotiations. The way he talks to Tucker.
Yeah, he said, I consider Putin a personal friend now or something like that.
Yeah, yeah, he says this stuff, which is kind of odd.
But that's all. I have understood that to just be Witkoff musing. Like, what is it? Has that been connected to any policy change with respect to Russia? No, not really. Pete Hegseth last week was testifying before Congress, and very few people picked up on this, but of course, because I'm a brilliant genius, I picked up on it.
Mm-hmm.
He was asked about the continuation of Ukraine arms provisions, and Biden, in the month before he left office, did 3 rounds of presidential drawdown authority provisions to Ukraine, they're called, which amounted to several $billions. So huge outlays of arms to Ukraine. And those are still being dispersed by the by the Trump administration as we speak, according to Hegseth. So, like, that fundamental element of the policy dynamic has not shifted. Even if Witkoff can like go on a podcast and muse about how maybe Putin has
Yeah.
certain grievances that we can accommodate.
So who do you think? So somebody is. So I think the part of the idea, intuition here behind this is like Witkoff is not a blob guy. He's not a foreign policy expert. I think people assume you see like a guy who is like a real estate guy who's just Trump's buddy. Like he's going to be like whatever, negotiate with Putin. Like he's not going to have like this attachment to Ukrainian national sovereignty and Ukrainian territorial integrity. I think that's
Yeah,
why people think this.
true enough.
Yeah.
But I
And
just don't think it hasn't amounted to anything substantive yet.
yeah. Well, I mean, I do think that they did. I mean, the idea that they didn't do anything on Russia that was different, like you said, they negotiated. I think that they
That's
had these
the one
kind of,
difference.
they
I
floated
mean,
these
Trump
kind of
loves negotiating for the sake of negotiating. He did that
no,
with
but they floated these proposals that were giving more than Biden would have gave at the time, right? Because there was like they would recognize, was it they would recognize Crimea? Even that was on the table, which was never on the table with
well,
Biden.
that was
I think
floated to somebody. It's never that's not the official position anywhere.
it's been reported, isn't it? That's been reported that this was the deal that they gave them. There was something like recognize Crimea, freeze the lines, and then like move on. That was basically the deal. And I think they realized
Uh,
that Putin wouldn't take it.
I've reported that recognition of Crimea was an official offer. I
I don't
think
know
that
about official, but it's like that's how you get to official. You like you start. It's not like you. It's not like you send them DocuSign or something. It's like that's how you talk and that's how you do these things. And I think what they found out was Putin wasn't just interested in like freezing the line, and so like there just was a disagreement. Like what Putin would take and what the U.S. and Ukraine would take, they just didn't match, and that's all there was to it. But they
well,
were willing to be
I'll grant
dovish relative to Biden.
there could be some significant, I think a little bit overstated, but still significant differences with respect to Ukraine, Russia. But in the Middle East, it's a whole different story, and that's what we're dealing with now.
Yeah.
An cataclysmic eventuality, at least from my perspective. Think about what did Witkoff do? Remember when Trump came into office, Witkoff, on Trump's behalf, in conjunction with Brett McGurk, who was his counterpart in the outgoing Biden administration, came up with this supposed ceasefire in Gaza. And the idea was, oh, I was being berated and hectored, including, behind the scenes and also publicly by people who were offended that I wasn't sufficiently in awe of the fact that Trump really put the hammer down on Netanyahu and forced him to accept this ceasefire in Gaza.
Hmm.
And it did last for like a month and a half or something. And then Witkoff was supposed to have been in charge of extending, at least nominally. The claim was initially that Witkoff was going to be very deeply involved in